I'm here to tell you an ugly truth. Not just that people like Olufemi Otaiwo, uh, who wrote a leap capture about how powerful took over identity politics, who I have a critique of. Honestly, Taiwo has downplayed the fact that a lot of identity politics was elite to begin with, but there's this current other strain of recognition politics and things like the first BLM protest, the immediate aftermath of George Floyd, that was organic and related to material circumstances, that was not initially any kind of grift or elite machine. In fact, they started with riots in Ferguson and Maryland and other places, but ended in the colleges and talking in the way college activists talk. So Taiwo is not wrong that there was an elite capture, but there's also an elite identity politics, which was always a thing. Adolf Reed's talked about it for a long time. Freddie DeBoer has talked about elites eating the social justice movement. An extension of this, but more pronounced and drawn out than identity politics. Now, both those books, I think, were actually too kind to their critique subjects, but that's not the point here. The point here is that I hate to tell you, but elite capture exists in left populism. The Bernie crap movement is just as much a product of educated elites often sniping at other educated elites over their perceived politics in academia, which has led to an overfocus on like the professional managerial class in academia as representative of the professional managerial class as a whole, which frankly has never been true. This is the kind of mistake you would make if you were primarily looking at it from an elite standpoint. And I started noticing with the controversies around Graham Plattner. Graham Plattner worked for a Blackwater subsidiary, Constellius, in 2018 for 6 months, and he left. He had a Totenkopf tattoo, which he's now had covered up, but he had it during the beginning of the campaign. Now, I do not think the man is a secret Nazi. I know a lot about military subcultures. I have several family members in the military, one of which was an Army Ranger, so I'm very aware of the culture that they're coming from. I also worked at a military college in the beginning of my career when I transitioned from being an insurance customer service guy and then an insurance accounts receivable guy into education. All right. And frankly, I've also worked in corrections when I was very, very young and know that culture too. It would not surprise me that people would get ironically get a Totenkopf. It does surprise me they would claim that he didn't know what it was. I just don't believe that for a second. And the liberal trying to push that confused me. But I noticed you had your standard progressive cohort that all claim to be kind of left populist come out. Matt Stoller, Sam Handelsby over at Aon, my friend Ben Burgess, all these people came out. Now, I started looking at the backgrounds of these left populists, and I've been looking at this for a long time. How many people from the Bernie campaign are Harvard grads in political science and or economics? Many. This does not invalidate what they do or say that they're insincere. It's just that they are the same elites they're talking about. And what bothers me, if you look at Plattner and a lot of these endorsed left populist candidates who have working class social credentials, they don't. They're petite bourgeois, often from generational money. Many had elite educations. They do not come from the working class any more than the right populists doing the same thing. So I've said before, Pete Hegseth comes from Harvard. This is people calling from inside the house. Now, in and of itself, that wouldn't bother me, particularly if people owned it, if they just admitted their elite backgrounds. and talked about why they were converted to fighting for the common man. I would kind of believe it, although I wouldn't entirely trust their incentive structures. But what bothers me about this is that Plattner's an interesting case. All right. But he wasn't the only one. I started noticing, and I mentioned this on a live stream, that there's like 7 or 8 progressive candidates, some that I saw endorsed by Bernie or by people around that milieu, around the Justice Democrats, who were doing national ad campaigns, kind of replicating what happened with AOC and John Fetterman. Now, why? Why would you be investing in national ad campaigns and doing crypto, what I call crypto advertising through the back end of TikTok and Instagram, the way Taylor Lorenz accused the Chorus people of doing, which they were? At a national level, when none of the people you're appealing to can vote in these elections for the most time. Very few of them can. And remember, Facebook ads and Instagram posts can be targeted, particularly Facebook ads. They can be targeted for specific demographics and specific regions, down to specific cities and specific age cohorts. This is not like blanket cable news ads. So the people know that they're doing this. So the question that you have to have is why? And why are all these elite journos like Ryan Graham wasting so much political capital on a main Senate race? Now you may say, well, the Senate's important. It can help impeach Trump. Well, I hate to tell you, there are something like 35 Senate seats up at any given time. Only 27 of those are held by Republicans. Only like 7 or 8 of them are competitive. Now it's very easy because the Democrats would need about 4 seats to get a clear control of the Senate in a majority sense. But to bypass something like impeachment, which requires a 2/3 vote, you would need about 65 senators, which you literally cannot get this election cycle, assuming that the government opens back up and all that, which is a big assumption at this point. Furthermore, I got told that how Plattner's going to fight for the working man and go after the people with powers, money, and power, except that Plattner is going to be just as dependent as every other fucking Democrat on money and power to stay in office. So I started thinking, so we've had the Chorus scandal. We've talked about all the different elite captures in social justice and identity politics, and the fact that, if we're also honest, this is kind of an elite game. I realized that there's elite capture in left populism. That the number of Bernie-crat staffers that have signature in various organizations and stable jobs and media organizations, etc., have led to an entire multi-million-dollar infrastructure to keep people in the public eye and ignoring their past votes and behaviors, and the Biden in particular. Now, the reason why I focused on Plattner is because Plattner seems like a mercurial figure who codes working class but doesn't really have working class origins. And if that sounds like John Fetterman, it's because it's very close. We don't know that Plattner's going to vote like Fetterman. We have no indication of that. But we didn't have it with Fetterman either. Yes, there were class indications, but honestly, there are more red flags here than there were with John Fetterman. But then I started thinking about, why are so many people invested in this? Like, why are some of the people whom I know I respect Corey Robbins, who's doing this with Mamdani. We've seen Mamdani get more and more cozy to the Democratic establishment. Hakeem Jeffries has now finally accepted he's a fait accompli and trying to throw things behind them. This seems like not a way to run a counterinsurgency for left populism. It seems like a way to bring vitality back to a Democratic Party that seems utterly dead. Now, you may say those are not opposed aims, but the question is who's going to pay for left populist policies? Just like with the right, people talked about Trump and Trump getting his agenda through, but the MAGA agenda, as it was understood, has actually never completely gone through. What Trump wants goes through, and it has very little to do with the MAGA agenda, except that the MAGA agenda just becomes him. Now, I don't think that's elite capture. I don't know what is, but you may go, well, that's the right wing. It's not happening on the left outside of ID poll, and we're fighting the ID poll fight. Well, then why are all your left populist pundits are fucking people who were literally trained to be things like MSNBC back when that was a power in the world and was an MS Now or whatever the hell it is, punditry where there's just not enough jobs in a dying media market? And why is it that people have not paid attention to the fact that dark money in independent media is more rampant? Because if you can crowdsource something, you can also funnel money through it and launder. But this is a much larger problem, and I think it's one that people really need to think about. Elite capture is related to elite overproduction. And elite overproduction is related to the overcomplication of society and the need for specializations. So there are about 4 thinkers I think is really crucial to understanding this, and why left populism itself is probably already been elite capture. But before I go into the theoretical concerns, I want to talk about some of the money that's going through this. Record amounts of money have been raised since Bernie Sanders and AOC started doing their oppose Trump, fight the oligarchy campaign. Some of them raising as many as 20 million. And this funnels through a progressive infrastructure that is pretty solid now. I'm going to the Bullhorn Bulletin newsletter, and I'm going to talk a little bit about one of the things that's come up, because just like Chorus has its funding with millions of dollars in it, and the abundance people probably have billions of dollars through tech funding trying to fight for the Democrats, the progressives have turned something like this into a thing too, with a lot of very questionable decisions in the past. So you can find us on October 23rd on the Bullhorn Bulletin. This doesn't actually mention Plattner, but anyway, the 134 million firm that sold the myth of John Fetterman, or how so-called progressive consulting firm turned Bernie's movement into a cash cow and establishment tool. You see, what I've been trying to say is you're not opposing the establishment of the Democratic Party anymore by running these insurgent candidates. In fact, even though I think real anger is really fed up with these insurgency candidates, if you look at who some of these people have supported in their groups, they supported Biden too, and they supported the mainstream of the Democratic Party as well. From a game theoretical perspective, not only is this elite overproduction, and we're going to come back to that, but also it's a way to return vitality to a dying political party. And we saw this with the Tea Party and the GOP. The GOP was in a rough way after the Bush presidency. Neoconservatism was increasingly unpopular, et cetera, et cetera. The Tea Party came up. Its leaders eventually denounced it as astroturfs very quickly. And yet, it's what we remember as like the organic response to the problems of the GOP, which eventually leads to MAGA. Now, the Tea Party's concerns are actually extremely different from MAGA's, but that insurgency was actually an internal elite captured debate. And it didn't really lead to the policies, lack of wars, tax relief, etc., that the Tea Party was concerned about. In fact, what it eventually did was get libertarians on the nationalist train, not the other way around. And you're like, oh, how does that apply to these people taking all this, doing all these ads to get more money? Well, let's talk about what this is getting funneled through. Have you gotten a text or an email from a political candidate that you never supported? Yep, I get it from John Ossoff all the time, but also from AOC. Asking you to chip in $5 to defend democracy. Maybe you deleted it. I definitely do. But that I also get it from the Republican side. It's funny, but anyway. But that message probably didn't come from a candidate. It came from a political consulting firm repackaged that Bernie movement into a for-profit scheme. One of the biggest names in the business is Middleseat, a self-described visionary, persuasive, disruptive, and dynamic digital firm that built empires in its branding, establishment, politicians, and grassroots crusaders. Their website showcases glossy ad reels and testimonials, celebrated their progressive clients, and reads like a leftist wish list: racial justice, climate action, immigration rights, intersectional feminism. The branding is perfect. The business model is cynical genius, raking in a whopping $134 million since 2017. On top of their portfolio is John Fetterman. Middleseat's site features multiple campaign videos of the Pennsylvania senator, no progressive today, portraying him as a blue-collar hero standing up to the system. That's not his origins. The problem is, once the camera stopped rolling, Fetterman stood with the very system he claimed to fight, making what appeared to be a sharp right turn to his supporters, but not surprising to those familiar with Fetterman's long record. Middleseat's growing client list raises a number of serious questions. Do they vet their clients? Are they critical about who they sell their branding to? Or do they simply offer it to anyone thinking of any of less populism? The firm claims to be a full-service media and fundraising firm for progressive causes and candidates, implying that its work is guided by shared values. Its website even boasts, we are bringing our values to work, and we build our movements that honor the authentic perspectives of our clients. But do they? The firm doesn't just build websites and film ads and profit from selling supporter lists to political clients. Firms like Middleseat build myths. They provide a costume and a template for candidates' cosplay as populist change makers, even when their records tell another story. A major part of that grift comes from what's known as the industry as list acquisitions, the buying and selling repackaging of supporter data. It is one of the most profitable aspects of political consulting. Campaigns pay Middleseat to collect email addresses and donor information, often with information from everyday people who sign up for political events, petition, campaign websites, and donate. Those same lists are then resold and rented to other campaigns, meaning that the donors who think they're giving to one candidate soon find their inboxes flooded by others who they've never supported, and often who they can't vote for. Data sales are big business, and political consulting class is no section. It has helped Middleseat quietly amass millions while claiming to build a movement for the people. Middleseat's $134 million machine. Campaign consulting is a massive industry, and Middleseat has made more than $34 million since 2017, according to the Federal Election Commission data. Its client list includes the who's who of progressive politics: Fetterman for Pennsylvania, $20.7 million; Beto O'Rourke, $18.6 million; Katie Porter, $10.8 million; Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, $8.6 million; and Bob Casey, $7.6 million. Top clients also include political action committees such as Leaders We Deserve, Move On, Heartland Patriots, For Blue, mostly bellwether PACs within the Democratic Party establishment, all of whom, themselves were actually insurgents within the Democratic Party establishment at one time, particularly Move On. Leaders We Deserve PAC is one of the newest, and a PAC founded by David Hogg, which was paid $6.2 million to Middleseat for digital advertising and media production this election cycle, according to FEC filings. Hogg, the former vice chair of the DNC before being removed by daring to threaten the party's primary incumbents, now runs a PAC to boost insurgent and young progressive candidates across the country. The model is reminiscent of brand new Congress and Justice Democrats, which led movements in the last decades to unseat entrenched incumbents with anti-establishment cabinets. And on paper, it sounds like a bold attempt to challenge establishment and elect new generation of unapologetic leaders. In reality, Leaders We Deserve has become part of the same ecosystem it claims to resist, funneling millions into the very firm that built their reputations by repackaging establishment figureheads, who is boasted on Middleseat's website as progressive darling, as daring progressive leaders, which a lot of people bought until Gaza with Joe Biden, and I don't know why they did. With Justice Democrats, one of Middle Seat's clients being one of its first PACs to funnel candidates to the Middle Seat's apparatus. Ironic as it may be, PACs like Leaders We Deserve, Justice Democrats, and Beto Works, powered by the people, claim to be dedicated to insurgent politics while utilizing the same consulting firm that repackages centrists as edgy revolutionaries. And while the firm does make millions off of creating ads, mailers, text campaigns, and websites, the scale of Middle Seat's profiteering on the list sale model is also staggering. Ocasio-Cortez spent more than $3.7 million on list acquisitions from Middle Seat alone. Fetterman paid more than $1.19 million. This means donor money is being spent to buy lists, then to fundraise from the same list they just bought in a circular of profit and grift, like from Middle Seat. No, AOC is not a millionaire off of this. She's a upper middle class person. But millions flow through her coffers to keep her in the national eye for a variety of reasons. Middle Seat's founders, Kenneth Pendleton and Hector Sigla, worked with Bernie Sanders' 2016 campaign before joining Our Revolution, the organization born out of the Sanders movement. They took the policies, platforms, and energy that sparked a national call for universal health care, a federal jobs guarantee, and the abolition of ICE, and turned it into a business model, selling for authenticity to candidates and organizations who could afford it. Today, they use the model to progressive white establishment Democrats like President Joe Biden and John Fetterman, and left-wash messaging for organizations like Move On. Middle Seat has perfected the tone. It copies reads like Bernie 2016 with the edges buffed off. Just enough to fire to inspire, never enough to burn bridges with the DNC. It sells rebellion for pre-approved corporate donors. John Fetterman as a brand. At the top of Middle Seat's portfolio sits John Fetterman, its supposed mouthpiece. The firm's site features multiple campaign videos of the Pennsylvania senior, portraying him as a blue-collar hero standing up to the system. Middle Seat helped sell Fetterman, the former lieutenant governor of Pennsylvania, as a hoodie-wearing working-class populist who could unite rural voters and disillusion progressives, leftists, and independents. But long before Middle Seat turned him into a national figure, Fetterman had already built a record that contradicted that image. In 2013, while serving as mayor of Braddock, Pennsylvania, Fetterman chased down and detained a non-black jogger at gunpoint after he heard gunfire. The man, Chris Mares, was completely innocent. No gun was ever found, and Fetterman never faced consequences for the incident, according to the reporting by the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette and CNN. Yet the story, which could have derailed any other political career, was largely buried under the rug, under the rugged working-class reformer brand. The brand, of course, would later be polished to perfection. When Fetterman ran for the Senate in 2022, his campaign drew hundreds of thousands of dollars in support from pro-Israel lobbying groups, including the American Public Affairs Committee, AIPAC, and affiliates, according to a campaign finance data review by Open Secrets in the Washington Post. His deep alignment with these donors has been evident in his unwavering support for Israel's military action, beyond even the Biden administration at many times, even when they had drawn international condemnation for human rights violations and credible accusations of carrying out ethnic cleansing and genocide of Palestinian people. Fetterman's political consequences, from go-turning mayor to AIPAC-backed senator, shows how effectively Middle Seats repackaged controversy into credibility. These candidates who once self-styled as vigilantes were rebranded as progressive everyman to fight for justice. And if this doesn't sound familiar to you to what you're seeing right now, you're a fucking idiot. He ran unfamiliar policies like universal health care, marijuana legislation, and economic justice, only to abandon all of his core issues once elected and to spin to the right that his supporters with a whiplash. And you saw this with Kamala Harris and Medicare for All and all that too. So why are these elite people buying this? Like, people aren't paying these Harvard journalists who run podcasts and indie media sites to whitewash this stuff. So why are they doing it? Well, it also gives them a new niche and a new force for patronage, since the old forms are drying up and their old forms are largely discredited, even though it's from a lot of the same people. Now, for those of you who go, ha ha ha, but what about the right? The right does this too. The Mercers, the Adelsons, those people who are major donators to MAGA were also major donators to neoconservatives and moral majority people. This is not new. You just don't know how it works. Middle Seat sold Fetterman as a different kind of Democrat, the anti-establishment antidote to Beltway politics, but the reality looks very different. In the Senate, Fetterman has become a new rotating villain, just like Christian Sinema, another progressive darling at one point before him. taking the place of Kristen Sinema and Joe Manson, who wasn't a progressive, but Sinema was. Sinema was even related to the Green Party. She was the first bisexual candidate, blah, blah, blah. She was involved with Occupy Wall Street. As the Democrat most likely to side with Republicans. He's become a new scapegoat for the establishment Democrats who want to maintain a veneer of credibility while hiding behind a donor class. This week, as Democrats attempted a government shutdown maneuver to protect health care, SNAP, and other social safety net programs, Featherman broke rank and voted in line with the GOP. It is part of a pattern that infuriated the Democratic Party loyalists and grassroots supporters alike. Recently, he also demonized anti-ICE protesters and migrants and post supporting mass deportation, which Bernie has gone on a show and supported ICE stuff as well now. Although, so I'm sure my friends over there at Jacobin Magazine will tell me that I'm mischaracterizing it, but I saw the video. Just this month, Featherman became the only Democrat to vote against blocking Donald Trump's drone strikes on Venezuelan boats in the Caribbean. He voted to support Israel's bombardment of Iran, openly dehumanizing Palestinian people, and has been outspoken in defending the unwavering U.S. support for Israel's military, including opposing the Levy law, which prohibits U.S. government aid to governments credibly accused of human rights abuses. Featherman's voting record does not just betray the progressive principles he campaigned on, it exposes how political marketing can completely override political reality, turning hopes of struggling people into a cash cow. Now, then why are people doing this with Plattner? Now, we don't know what Plattner's going to do. We don't know what any of these people are going to do. But I can tell you one thing we can say for sure. Left populism, when it was tried in Europe by far more sincere forces when they had their own party apparatus, failed in every instance. Podemos, Syriza, Corbyn, and Labour. Corbyn and our party has preemptively failed, apparently. So when you look at Europe and you go, it's going to work better here in the donor system than it did in Europe where it failed, because the donor system and the congressional system that exists here is somehow going to be more open to this. And when socialist pundits, including ones I respect, like Corey Robbins, start talking about Mamdani as like proof of this red rave going back from the Red Scare, they ignore the fact that this has happened with Joseph McCartney, with the Rainbow Coalition, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And at no time, even when you did get people elected, did it lead to progressive reforms or working class or left populist reforms. None of these people are Huey Long. And very few of these people telling you that they speak for the common person or anything other than elites with high academic books and very powerful friends who have helped fund their projects. Don't be a moron just about this on the right. Now you might go, it takes money to fight money. I believe in you. But then why sell these false visions? Because these people are some of the first people to betray you in Congress. Sinema was before that too, and Sinema was also a progressive darling. The problem is not just branding, it's what the branding preys on. Middle seat and firms like it build their business on generating pain in working class Americans. The fundraising scripts tap into housing insecurity, medical debt, collapse, and raises real crisis that face people every day, and which progressives have never even come close to remotely fixing, even when their party was in power, even when their party held 2 of the 3 branches of government, or in one case has held 3 branches of government in 2008. A CBS News report found that 59% of Americans cannot afford a $1,000 emergency expense. A political analysis found that when underemployment and true unemployment numbers are included, the functional unemployment rate is closer to 26%, nearly 1 in 4 people. And yet, these same voters are having to choose between food on the table and paying rent, and they're being flooded with fundraising appeals by professional firms that promising to fight for you. These appeals rake in millions in small dollar donations, but much of that money cycles back into the consulting industry itself. Representative Ocasio-Cortez, for example, raised $20 million this year alone, which much of her campaign spending flowing right back into middle seat instead of community organizing. For people like me from places like Appalachia and across the country whose generational poverty authenticity is not branding, it is survival. And when necessities like healthcare, stable housing, and good paying jobs are a pipe dream, middle seat's grift is not just out of touch, it is a form of gaslighting that never delivers results. This is why middle seat's model feels like betrayal. It takes the struggle board in real kitchens, picket lines, and shelters and turns it into a commodity. Fetterman is just the latest proof. The man who once felt himself as a distant towny Democrat has become a symbol of the old kind, just like Christian cinema before him, who did the same fucking thing. And this kind who talks like a populist, votes like a corporatist, and clashes with the check and cashes the checks in between. Consulting firms like Middleseat turn conviction into content, outrage into email copies, and very real struggles into fodder for profit. The story is a mirror for modern corporatized politics, where our desperation for change, revolutionary energy is exploited, watered down, and repackaged into millions in revenue, and the pipeline fed back into the Democratic Party establishment. So yes, this is happening. The same thing that happened with Chorus and Abundance is happening on the Bernie side. There's now an industry tied to it. But the elite capture part of it is where we're going to go next. Now I'm doing my series on Aristotle, but I'm going to go into Turchin's elite capture and elite overproduction, and why this may be happening, and why there's so many Harvard business people who are talking for the common man and talking how no one cares about this, which, by the way, does make people like Plattner popular, because any controversy gets someone on the map and will have people in that state double down. If you don't see that this is a marketing strategy that many of you leftists are falling in, communist and Marxist are falling prey for, come on. Protect your peace and be fucking smarter.